Opening. You're listening to Crossing Lines and Claiming Hearts by K.W. Blake. All rights are reserved. No part of this audiobook may be copied, shared, or transmitted in any form without the author's prior permission. This is a work of fiction. Any similarities to real people, living or dead, are purely coincidental. We hope you enjoy the journey. If you do, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share to support more content like this. Chapter 1. Axon Clare's office overlooked the city like a watchtower of glass and steel. 46 floors up, the streets looked more like lines on a map than real roads. Cars were no more than tiny moving dots, the river a sheet of silver cutting through the skyline. At this hour of the morning, the sun broke over the horizon in a slow blaze, turning the buildings into columns of gold and shadow. This view never lost its impact, though Axon would never admit that out loud. He liked to start his day here, before the phone started buzzing, before voices carried through the halls, before the chaos of meetings and negotiations pulled at his focus. The quiet belonged to him. On his desk, 3 files lay open in precise order. The Franklin merger, a deal worth billions. The kind of merger that could shift industries, collapse competitors, and make headlines for years. Every clause, every comma mattered. Axon knew it, and so did everyone involved. He leaned back in his chair, pen tapping lightly against his lip. One misstep could ruin everything. But that wasn't a thought that worried him. He thrived in this arena, in these high-stakes games where most men cracked under pressure. He'd been doing it for decades, and losing wasn't in his vocabulary. A knock sounded at his office door, sharp. 2 raps. "Come in," he said, his voice low and clipped, eyes still on the contract. The door opened. Robert Maxwell stepped in, wearing one of his trademark tailored suits, his salt and pepper hair combed neatly back. Robert had been with the company long enough to see Axon rise from ambitious upstart to titan of the industry. He was cautious where Axon was bold, steady where Axon was fire. That balance had kept them strong. "Morning, Axon," Robert greeted, his voice calm but holding an undertone of satisfaction. "I wanted to introduce you to someone before things spiral into madness today." Axon set down his pen, glancing up. He expected a junior partner, maybe a new hire tucked into the finance team. What he didn't expect was the woman who stepped in behind Robert. She walked in with a presence that filled the room before she spoke a single word. Tall, poised, warm brown skin that seemed to catch the light. Dark curls pulled back into a low knot at the nape of her neck, with a few loose strands framing her face. And her eyes, sharp, bright, fearless, met his directly. "This is Kaya Monroe," Robert said, pride in his tone. "Newest addition to our legal team. She comes highly recommended, specializes in corporate law, and she has a history of closing deals most people would have walked away from." Kaya extended her hand. "Mr. Clare, it's a pleasure." Her voice was smooth, husky, with a confidence that didn't falter. No nervous fidgeting, no avoidance. Just calm assurance. Axon stood and took her hand. Her skin was warm against his, her grip firm. "Miss Monroe," he said evenly, "welcome to the firm." For a brief moment, the handshake lingered, not enough for anyone else to notice, but enough for both of them to feel. "I've already reviewed the Franklin merger," Kaya said, releasing his hand with professional ease. "There's a clause in the supplier agreement that might create conflict later. I'd like to go over it with you when you have time." Axon's brows lifted. She hadn't been here more than a day and already spotted something buried in the contract. Most lawyers took weeks to get their footing in this environment. "Noted," he said, studying her closely. "We'll meet on it after the morning brief." Kaya nodded once. "Of course." Robert gestured toward the hallway. "I'll get her settled in with the rest of the team." As they left, Axon found himself watching her longer than he intended. The cut of her shoulders, the measured steps, the quiet way she commanded space. It was rare. People usually entered this office carrying nerves like baggage. Kaya walked in as if she belonged. The morning meeting was tense as usual. The glass-walled conference room stretched across the floor, its long table cluttered with open laptops, coffee cups, and folders. The Franklin merger dominated the discussion. Axon kept the pace sharp, his tone clipped as he demanded updates and clarity. Kaya sat 2 seats down, wedged between seasoned attorneys who had been there longer than she'd been practicing law. She listened carefully, pen moving over her notebook. But when Robert finally asked her to weigh in, she didn't hesitate. "I think the supplier contract has a flaw," Kaya said, opening her folder with precise movements. Clause 14B allows unilateral price changes without prior approval. If Franklin's supplier decides to raise costs, we'd have little defense. It's not catastrophic, but it's a dangerous precedent, especially since they've done it with smaller firms before. Silence fell over the table. It wasn't often a newcomer disrupted the rhythm of a meeting with such confidence. Axon turned his head slowly toward her. "And your solution?" Kaya met his gaze without a flicker of doubt. "Add a stipulation for mandatory 30-day notice, tied to a cap based on current market value. That way they can adjust if necessary, but we aren't blindsided." It was simple, efficient, smart. "Draft the language," Axon said. His voice was low, approving. "I want it in the next revision." "Yes, sir," she answered, and her eyes didn't waver. The meeting continued, but Axon's focus snagged on her once more. The way she leaned slightly forward when she spoke, the steadiness in her tone. She wasn't here to play small. Afterward, when Robert stopped by Axon's office, Axon asked, "Where did you find her?" "Kaya?" Robert's smile held a trace of pride. "She's been making waves for a decade. The last 4 years, she worked at a boutique firm that handled high-stakes tech negotiations. I've been watching her for a while. When she became available, I made the call." "She's sharp," Axon said, almost to himself. Robert raised a brow knowingly. "That she is." Kaya's first day didn't let up. She moved seamlessly between calls, reviews, and meetings, her energy never faltering. Axon noticed. He always noticed. Late that afternoon, she walked past his office as he sat on the phone, his deep voice low and commanding. For the briefest moment, her eyes met his through the glass wall. And there it was, that spark. Quiet, unspoken, but undeniable. It wasn't something either of them could acknowledge. Not here, not yet. By the time she left that evening, the sky had painted itself in streaks of pink and violet. She carried files in her bag, her heels clicking against the marble floors as she exited the building. She should have felt drained after such a day, but instead there was a fire inside her. A thrill. Working under Axon Clare wasn't going to be easy, but something in her told her it would be worth it. Upstairs, Axon leaned back in his chair as the city lights began to glitter like scattered jewels. He poured himself a drink, the amber liquid catching the glow from his office lamps. Kaya Monroe was going to be interesting.
Chapter 2. Kaya. The rain fell in steady sheets that Monday morning, streaking down the floor-to-ceiling windows of Axon's corner office. From 46 floors up, the city looked muted under the heavy gray sky, a watercolor painting blurred by silver rivulets. The streets glistened, headlights glowing like smudges of gold through the storm. But inside Clare and Company, the atmosphere was anything but muted. The tension had a pulse, vibrating through the air with the constant shuffle of papers, the ding of elevators, the clipped tones of assistants rushing between offices. Everyone was talking about the Harborcrest acquisition. The hotel chain had once been a respected mid-tier brand, the kind of reliable name that middle-class families trusted for vacations and business trips alike. But years of poor management had left its properties outdated, its debts compounding, and its brand reputation sinking like an anchor in deep water. Bankruptcy had been inevitable. Now, with the courts ready to sell off its carcass, Axon Clare had positioned himself to swoop in, buy low, renovate, rebrand, flip Harborcrest into a luxury boutique chain that would rival the likes of Fairmont or Rosewood. It was bold, risky, and dangerous. Exactly the kind of move Axon was known for. That morning, the conference table stretched before them like a battlefield. Laptops were open, glowing with endless spreadsheets. Stacks of manila folders stood like towers of evidence. Coffee mugs, half-drained, lipstick-stained, or forgotten, lined the edges. Kaya sat near the far end, the cool blue light of her laptop screen reflecting in her eyes. She typed quickly, pausing only to jot down notes in neat, precise handwriting. She had learned fast that Claire and Company wasn't the kind of firm where you could coast. If you weren't sharp, if you weren't relentless, you drowned. Robert Maxwell stood at the center, his voice carrying across the room. We're close. If we finalize the asset purchase agreement by Friday, we'll be ready for court approval next week. The main issue is making sure every contract tied to Harborcrest properties is accounted for. No loose ends, no surprises. Axon stood at the head of the table, silent for most of the meeting. He didn't need to speak to command the room. His presence alone did that. Broad shoulders squared beneath a charcoal suit, hands resting lightly on the table as his eyes scanned the faces before him. When he finally spoke, his voice cut through the tension. This deal only works if we know exactly what we're buying. I don't want to discover after the fact that we've inherited obligations no one flagged. If there's even a hint of uncertainty, you bring it to me. Immediately. The words hung in the air like a warning. Kaya glanced up, her eyes locking with his for a half second before flicking back to her screen. She'd been placed on the financial review, the deep end, as Robert had called it. And though the workload was overwhelming, Kaya thrived on it. Pressure sharpened her. By midday, she was buried in Harborcrest's financial history. Profit and loss statements, ledgers, property valuations. At first, the story was predictable. Dwindling occupancy rates, rising costs, loans stacking on top of loans, a slow bleed. But then something caught her eye. A Miami property logged nearly $800,000 in structural maintenance over 6 months. She cross-checked the inspection reports from the same period. Perfectly clean. No major issues. Nothing that would justify nearly $1 million in expenses. Her brows knit. Odd. She kept digging. Vendor payments began to jump out. Small amounts at first, but irregular. Several vendors, all linked to different hotels, carried nearly identical mailing addresses. She pulled incorporation records. 2 of them didn't even exist in the state registry. The names were there, but the tax IDs were invalid. Her pen stilled against her notebook. That wasn't sloppy. That was deliberate. The more she looked, the more a picture formed. Shadowy payments disguised as routine maintenance, fake vendors siphoning cash, not a fortune at once, but millions over years. By the time she looked up, the office had thinned. A few people ducked out for lunch. Her stomach grumbled in protest, but Kaya ignored it, scooping her notes and heading for Robert's office. She knocked lightly. "Kaya," he said, waving her in. "What's up?" "I've been reviewing Harborcrest's financials." She set her folder on his desk, flipping it open to highlight the discrepancies. There are vendor payments that don't add up. Repairs billed, but never confirmed. I think this is more than sloppy bookkeeping. Robert leaned forward, scanning the pages with practiced eyes. His face stayed neutral. "Kaya, these things happen. Businesses cut corners. They misfile, double bill, lose track. It doesn't mean fraud." She shook her head. "Some of these vendors don't have valid tax IDs." Robert sat back, folding his hands across his chest. "We're not auditors. If we chase every loose thread, this deal never closes. Let the consultants do their jobs." "But if there's fraud," she pressed, her tone firm, "we could inherit liability." Robert's gaze sharpened, his voice cool. "And if we stall the deal, we risk losing it. Axon has been laying the groundwork for months. Unless you've got proof that screams fraud, you don't throw sand in the gears. Understood?" Kaya hesitated, jaw tight. Understood. But she didn't agree. Back at her desk, she opened a new document, not on the shared drive, but on her private flash. She began cataloging every irregularity, every suspect vendor, every suspicious payment. Her pulse picked up as the list grew. She'd seen something like this before, years ago, when a small construction firm had collapsed under scandal. fraud hidden in fake vendor accounts, lawsuits, bankruptcies, reputations destroyed overnight. The unease in her chest grew. Whoever had siphoned money from Harbor Crest was still out there, and if she kept digging, they might notice. By late afternoon, the office had come alive again. Phones rang. Laughter echoed down the hall. Axon passed by her desk on his way to the conference room. He slowed, eyes catching on the screen in front of her. "How's the review coming?" His tone was casual, but his eyes sharp. "Almost finished with my section," she said smoothly. "Any issues?" Her fingers paused over the keyboard. For a moment, she considered telling him. He had told the room, "Flag everything." But Robert's warning lingered in her head. Noise? Not glaring. "Nothing I can't handle," she replied. Axon studied her for a moment, like a man weighing truth against instinct. Then he gave a short nod and moved on. That evening, the rain returned, tapping softly against the glass. The office thinned until only a few lamps burned. Kaya stayed, scrolling through expense after expense, cross-checking receipts and reports. There it was again, another phantom vendor. This one billed $200,000 in emergency roofing repairs for a hotel whose roof photos showed not a single missing shingle. Her stomach tightened. This wasn't negligence. This was theft. Millions of dollars bled out under the guise of repairs and maintenance. She rubbed her temples, exhaustion pulling at her bones. Her phone buzzed with a reminder about dinner plans she would now miss. She shut her laptop and slipped the flash drive into her bag. Tomorrow, she promised herself. She'd dig deeper tomorrow. Chapter 3. Kaya. The storm from the night before had cleared, but Kaya's mind hadn't. Sunlight streamed through the blinds of her apartment, golden but harsh, making her headache from a restless night feel sharper. She sat at her small kitchen table, untouched toast on a plate, her coffee cooling in the mug beside her. Spread before her were the notes she'd scribbled the night before, numbers, company names, addresses, all circled and underlined until the page looked like a web. She stared at the pattern, pen tapping rhythmically against the margin. Robert's dismissal kept replaying in her head. It wasn't that he'd brushed her off. Plenty of bosses did that when they didn't want a junior poking holes in a big deal. It was how he brushed her off. No curiosity, no follow-up, no promise to double-check. Almost as if he already knew what she would find. That thought lodged in her chest like a stone. Either Robert was dangerously careless, or he was deliberately looking the other way. And either one, in her book, was unacceptable. Her eyes drifted to the clock. Nearly 8. Her nerves buzzed. She'd been at the firm less than a week, and she was already contemplating going over her direct superior's head. If she did this, there was no going back. But the voice inside her, the one that had carried her through law school, through long nights at boutique firms where clients lied and investors bluffed, wouldn't shut up. The voice that said, if you see the fire, you don't just walk away and pretend it's not there. She exhaled, steadying herself. Today, she decided. Today, she'd take the risk. By the time she reached the office, Claire and company was its usual hive of motion. Assistants scurried down the marble floors. Voices carried down the glass-walled hallways, the faint aroma of fresh coffee drifting through the air. Kaya kept her head down at her desk, moving through her routine work, but her mind was elsewhere. She replayed how she'd approach him. Too cautious, and he'd dismiss her like Robert had. Too aggressive, and he might see it as ambition dressed as insubordination. She needed to be precise. By mid-morning, her chance came. Axon returned from a meeting, his long stride cutting across the office floor like he owned every inch of it, which, in a way, he did. He carried himself with the same authority he projected in the boardroom, steady, unflinching, lethal in his focus. Her pulse ticked up, but she rose from her chair anyway. "Mr. Clare?" Her voice was calm, professional. "Do you have a few minutes later today? I've been reviewing one of the Harbor Crest property contracts, and there's a detail I'd like to clarify with you directly." He paused, eyes flicking over her face. He saw more than she said. She felt it in the weight of his gaze. "Now's fine," he said, pushing open his office door. "Come in." The door clicked shut behind her, sealing off the hum of the outer office. The shift in silence was immediate, intimate, like stepping into another world. His office smelled faintly of leather and cedar, a masculine blend that fit him too well. Axon gestured to the chair opposite his desk. "What's on your mind?" Kaya sat, smoothing the folder in her lap with steady hands, even as her pulse jumped. "It's not just a contract question, Chi," she admitted. "It's more than that." His brows drew together slightly. "Go on." She opened the folder and slid the spreadsheet across his desk. Her fingers brushed the polished wood as she tapped the highlighted rows. "In reviewing Harbor Crest financials, I found irregularities. At first, I thought they might be harmless, typos, misplaced charges. But the deeper I looked, the more consistent the pattern became." He leaned forward, his gaze moving over the numbers. "These vendor payments," she explained, "several are to companies that don't appear to exist. Their tax IDs are invalid. In some cases, their mailing addresses are nearly identical to other vendors already on Harbor Crest's books. It looks like duplication or deliberate fabrication." Axon's gaze lifted from the page to her face. His eyes, icy blue, sharp, studied her like he was testing for cracks. "And you've confirmed they're not just clerical errors?" "Yes." Her voice didn't waver. "I cross-checked them with state records and federal tax data. Some of these vendors don't legally exist, and the expenses tied to them, hundreds of thousands of dollars, don't align with any physical repairs." She hesitated, then added, "I took this to Robert yesterday. He dismissed it as moitemals, said it wasn't our problem." Axon's expression darkened at Robert's name, though his tone remained even. "And you disagreed." "I did." Kaya held his gaze. "If this is fraud, the liability could be significant. We could inherit lawsuits, unpaid taxes, even criminal exposure depending on who was involved. I couldn't ignore it." A long silence stretched between them. He flipped through the papers slowly, absorbing every line, his expression unreadable. Kaya sat motionless, the weight of her choice pressing hard against her spine. When he finally looked up, there was no anger in his face, only sharp focus. "You've done your homework," he said. Relief slid through her veins, subtle but real. "I wanted to be certain before bringing it to you." "You were right to," he said. His voice dropped lower, decisive. "This isn't noise. It's a signal." Her chest loosened slightly, but the tension didn't vanish. "Robert is a competent lawyer," Axon went on, "but he's invested in closing this acquisition fast. That kind of investment can blind people to inconvenient truths. I can't afford blindness." Kaya straightened. "What do you want me to do?" "For now, nothing more than what you've been doing," he said. "But I'll have my own team verify these vendors discreetly. If your suspicions are correct, we'll need to decide how to confront Harbor Crest's management without giving them a chance to bury more." "Understood." He leaned back slightly, his gaze on her, more assessing now than before. "This conversation stays between us." "Yes, sir?" The corner of his mouth curved, not quite a smile, more like an acknowledgement, approval. "Most people wouldn't risk going over their superior's head their first week." That kind of judgment, when to speak up, when to take the hit, is rare. Kaya felt her pulse quicken under his stare. She lifted her chin. "If I'm wrong, I'll take the hit. But if I'm right, I'd rather be the one who spoke up than the one who stayed quiet. For half a second, something charged passed between them. Respect, yes, but also something warmer, more dangerous. His expression softened just enough to suggest he saw it too. Then, with practiced ease, he slipped back into his composure. Keep that mindset. It will serve you well here. When Kaya left his office, she felt both lighter and more exposed. She had made her move, laid her cards on the table, and Axon hadn't shut her down. But now she'd crossed a line. There was no retreat. Robert gave her a polite nod as she passed, unaware the ground beneath him had shifted. Chapter 4. Kaya. Axon Claire didn't waste time. By the time Kaya arrived the next morning, he had already made calls to people he trusted outside the firm, men and women who didn't answer to Robert or anyone on the board, forensic accountants who owed him favors, who had no stake in Harbor Crest beyond the truth they would uncover. When Kaya passed his open office door, he gave the briefest of nods. Later, that look promised. It wasn't until after lunch that he summoned her. The office beyond the door buzzed with the muted rhythm of phones and keystrokes, but the moment Axon closed the door behind her, the sound cut away. "I've put a team in motion," he said without preamble. His voice carried the weight of decisions made hours before. Off the books, outside the firm. If Harbor Crest is hiding fraud, we'll know. Kaya sat, setting her folder carefully on the desk. And Robert? He knows nothing. He won't, until I choose otherwise. She nodded once, already anticipating the fallout. Then we'll need to be careful. If he realizes I've gone around him, he'll shut me out of the review entirely. A faint curve touched Axon's mouth, something between amusement and approval. We'll be careful. From this point on, anything related to Harbor Crest stays between us. If we need to meet, we do it here, after hours. Her pulse gave a betraying jolt, though she kept her expression calm. Understood. Their first late-night meeting came 2 evenings later. The office floors were nearly deserted, the hum of elevators and the echo of distant footsteps reminding Kaya how empty the tower felt at night. Axon's office glowed warmly in the darkness, a single island of light against the vast sweep of glass and city beyond. Kaya spread her notes across the polished desk. Vendor lists, duplicate payments, cross-checked addresses. Her spreadsheets grew denser by the day, the pattern tightening like a net. Axon leaned over the papers beside her, jacket draped over the back of his chair, shirt sleeves rolled to his forearms. He pointed to a cluster of entries she had highlighted. "Walk me through this section again." "They all trace back to the same mailing address," Kaya explained, pen tracing the line of numbers. "Different vendors, but when you run it, it's an empty lot in Jacksonville. No office, no staff, just dirt and weeds. And the payments? $600,000 in 18 months. His eyes narrowed. "That's too precise to be sloppy bookkeeping." "That's what I thought." They fell into a rhythm, Kaya explained. Axon pressed for detail, both of them testing each theory until the truth took shape. The city outside blurred into a wash of light and shadow, while time slipped past unnoticed. By midnight, Kaya rubbed at her temple. "That's as far as I can go without subpoena power." Axon closed the folder in front of him, deliberate. "You've done more in a week than most people manage in a quarter. My outside team should have preliminary findings soon. When they do, we'll line them up against your work." She allowed herself the faintest smile. "And if it matches?" "Then," he said evenly, "we plan our move." The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was charged, taut as wire. The city glittered beyond the glass, and for a moment, neither seemed inclined to break it. The nights became their secret rhythm. Sometimes they spoke in a quick volley of questions and ideas, voices low but urgent as they connected the threads. Other nights, hours passed in companionable quiet. Kaya bent over spreadsheets, Axton absorbed in documents of his own, the silence broken only by the soft scrape of pages or the clack of her pen. Kaya noticed things in those hours she hadn't before. The way he rubbed the bridge of his nose when concentration ran long. The stillness he held when reading, as though the world could tilt around him and he wouldn't move until he was finished. Axon noticed things too. The way she tucked a loose curl behind her ear when her focus deepened. How her notes were meticulous, every number aligned, but her coffee mugs always left careless rings on the side table, she claimed. Her laugh, rare, low, and unguarded, struck him as more telling than anything she said. One night, Kaya was cross-referencing Florida property records when she glanced up to find him watching her. "What?" she asked, brow arched. "You don't flinch," he said. "Should I?" "Most people do. When the stakes get high, you sharpen instead." She lifted a shoulder. "Guess I don't know how to work any other way." His expression didn't soften, but approval gleamed in his eyes. "Good. We'll need that." By day, Kaya was just another associate, measured, professional, careful not to betray even a flicker of what happened behind closed doors. But at night, in the hush of his office, they weren't boss and subordinate. They were co-conspirators, two people guarding the same dangerous secret. And if sometimes the silence between them felt like something more, neither dared to name it. A glance across a spreadsheet, a pause before passing a file, a moment held too long, then broken before it could become something else. On the fifth night, the lamp cast a soft circle of gold across the desk as Kaya slid a fresh page toward him. "Two of the vendors we flagged dissolved their registrations this week." His gaze sharpened instantly. "Someone's covering tracks." That was my read too. They looked at each other, the weight of it pressing in. The fraud was deeper than they'd thought, and the people behind it more alert. Axon set the paper down, leaning back slowly. "This won't stay quiet much longer." Kaya knew he wasn't just talking about the scheme, and though neither of them said it aloud, they both understood. Once this cracked open, their late-night alliance, and whatever else lingered in the air between them, would be harder to keep in the shadows. For now, the work came first, and neither seemed ready to let go of the other's company. Chapter 5. Kaya. The rhythm of their nights together had settled into something almost natural. Kaya would wait until the building hushed, then slip into Axon's office with her laptop under one arm, her folders pressed close. He was always there first, sometimes standing at the window, sometimes bent over his desk, with his glasses low on his nose, always ready to continue exactly where they had left off. The work was intense, but so was everything else. Somewhere in the long hours and quiet exchanges, the investigation stopped feeling like just a job and became something else, a tether, binding them both into the same private orbit. One evening, they sat shoulder to shoulder, leaning toward her laptop. Their arms brushed, barely, but neither shifted away. "This vendor," Kaya said, pointing to a row of numbers, "the payments land exactly 31 days apart." Down to the hour. That's not scheduling. That's deliberate timing, just under the threshold that triggers audit flags. He didn't respond immediately. She felt his focus shift, not only to the screen, but to her. When he spoke, his voice was low. "You notice everything, don't you?" She met his eyes briefly, pulse quickening. "It's part of the job." His mouth curved, subtle but sure. "Not everyone's job, just yours." She forced herself to look back at the spreadsheet, pretending calm. "It's nothing special, just paying attention." "I disagree," he said simply. She didn't look at him again, not right then. It wasn't only words like that. It was the small things, the way his hand would brush hers, when passing a file, lingering a fraction too long. The way their eyes would catch when one of them made a breakthrough, holding for a beat before breaking away. The way a laugh shared over a ridiculous invoice carried them longer than it should. Every moment felt like a crossing, not of policy or rules. They both knew better than that, but of something quieter, older, impossible to name. One night, long after the last file was closed, Kaya lingered in the chair opposite him. She wasn't working anymore, just tracing notes she didn't need to reread. "You don't have to stay," he said, though his tone carried no dismissal. "I know," she replied softly, "but I don't mind." He studied her for a moment, then shifted the folder between them, his fingers brushing hers. This time, neither moved. His gaze held hers. "Because I chose this," he said quietly. "You didn't." "Didn't I?" she asked. Something shifted in his expression, warmer, heavier. "Maybe you did." The rational part of her mind kept its arguments ready. The age difference, the hierarchy, the certainty of gossip, the unspoken weight of a white man and a mixed-race woman under scrutiny. But reason meant little against the pull she felt, sitting across from him in the midnight hush of his office, closer than she should be. Another night, she reached for a file at the same moment he did. Her hand landed not on paper, but on the fabric of his thigh. Her breath stilled. She started to withdraw, but his hand closed lightly over hers, holding it there just long enough to burn the air between them. No pressure, no demand, just acknowledgement. When he let go, nothing was said, yet nothing was the same. The next night, it was his turn. He passed her a folder, fingers tracing the inside of her wrist as he did. Not accident, intent. "Vendor research?" he asked, voice smooth, all business. His eyes not entirely. She opened the file, steadying herself. "Vendor research." And so the rhythm continued. Numbers, strategy, and an undercurrent neither dared to name. Sometimes the case filled their hours. Other times, talk slipped into something lighter. He told her he always drank coffee black from the same heavy ceramic mug. She admitted she preferred tea, but only when she had the time to steep it properly. She told him about her first big win in court, how she'd argued circles around a senior partner twice her age. He told her about his first acquisition, how he nearly lost it because of one missed clause. Details that didn't matter. And yet, somehow, they did. One Friday, the building was silent, but for the patter of rain against the windows. Kaya leaned back in her chair, stretching until her muscles eased with a sigh. Axon's gaze flicked to her, then away. "We should call it a night." "Probably," she murmured, but she didn't move. Neither did he. Instead, he leaned back, watching her across the desk. Most people would have walked away from this already. Too much work. Too much risk. Most people aren't me. That's true. She gave a faint smile. And most people aren't you. The storm outside painted shadows across the walls as they regarded one another, something unspoken threading tight between them. At last, he stacked the papers neatly, deliberate, precise. "Same time Monday?" he asked. She nodded. "Same time." When she left his office, her pulse was still high. She told herself it was the case, the secrecy, the adrenaline. But deep down, she already knew better.
Chapter 6. Axon. The night had stretched on longer than either of them expected. Kaya sat perched at the far edge of Axon's desk, her laptop open, the blue glow casting shadows across her face. Outside, the city was quiet, too late for traffic, too early for the restless stirrings of dawn. They'd found it, the missing link, the proof they had chased for weeks, sleepless nights and endless tension boiling down to this one document. This, Kaya pushed the file toward him, her voice trembling with triumph. "This is it. The shell company Robert's been using to funnel payments. We can trace every cent straight back to him. Axon leaned forward, eyes scanning the numbers, the chain of transactions unfolding like a confession. His jaw flexed, then slowly loosened as the realization settled in. It's airtight. It's over, Kaya whispered, almost in disbelief. We actually did it. He leaned back in his chair, a rare or unguarded smile tugging at his lips. We did. For a moment, they just looked at each other. No immediate talk of legal strategy, no rushing to the next step, just the sharp, quiet satisfaction of having fought side by side and won. Relief bloomed through her, heady and intoxicating. She laughed, a real, unfiltered sound that filled the dim office. Axon chuckled too, shaking his head. You know, he said, I don't think I've ever enjoyed a victory this much. That's because you don't usually have someone to celebrate with at midnight in your office, she teased, her grin soft but challenging. His gaze caught hers, lingering. Maybe that's it. The air between them thickened. The easy laughter faded into something quieter, heavier. When she set her laptop aside and leaned back against the desk, her hand brushed against his where it rested on the arm of his chair. Neither of them pulled away. Her pulse spiked, loud in her ears. His eyes flicked down to her mouth before locking on hers again. Every unspoken thing between them rushed to the surface, undeniable now. Kaya, he said softly. Her name stretched like a test, like a prayer. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. His hand slid over hers, warm and deliberate, before he stood. The distance between them, just one step, felt like crossing a chasm they had been circling for months. When his mouth claimed hers, it wasn't tentative. It was urgent, searing. Months of restrained glances, accidental touches, and swallowed confessions erupted in a single, desperate kiss. Kaya moaned softly against his lips, her hands finding the solid breadth of his shoulders, tugging him closer. His arm locked around her waist, pulling her tight against him, as if he'd been waiting too damn long for this moment. The kiss deepened, fierce and unrelenting. His tongue tangled with hers, tasting, demanding, giving. She melted into him, her back arching as his body pressed hard against hers. Then it blurred, her back hitting the desk, papers scattering to the floor. She gave a sharp gasp when his hand slid up her thigh, under her skirt, gripping firmly as if staking a claim. The ragged groan he let out when she fumbled with his shirt, tugging it open, desperate to feel skin on skin. She was fire beneath his touch, every stroke stoking the hunger already clawing through them. His mouth trailed down her throat, biting, sucking, leaving marks that would remind her of this moment long after dawn. Her hand slipped lower, unbuckling his belt with trembling urgency. He hissed against her skin when she freed him, the weight of him thick and hot in her palm. Kaya, he rasped, voice rough, strained with restraint. Don't stop, she whispered, breathless. And he didn't. With one swift motion, he yanked her panties aside, his fingers sliding through her slick heat, groaning at how ready she already was for him. She gasped, clutching his shoulders, nails digging into his skin as he teased her, slow strokes that had her thighs trembling, begging without words. Axon, she breathed, desperate. Now. There was no hesitation. He pushed into her in a hard, deep thrust that stole her breath, filling her completely. She cried out, her legs wrapping around his waist, anchoring him inside her. He moved with raw force, each stroke driving them higher, harder, faster. The desk creaked beneath them, the sound swallowed by her moans and his guttural groans. Papers slid to the floor, forgotten, as he pounded into her like a man who'd waited too long and refused to hold back anymore. Her body arched into his, every nerve alight. His name spilled from her lips over and over, broken, pleading, worshipful. Look at me, he demanded hoarsely, forcing her gaze to his as he thrust deeper. She did, eyes locking with his, and the intensity there nearly unraveled her. The pressure built, unbearable, until it snapped, her release tearing through her with a violent, breathtaking force. She screamed his name as she shattered around him, her body clenching tight, dragging him over the edge with her. He groaned her name in return, his hips jerking as he buried himself deep, pulsing hot inside her, his release raw and consuming. For a long moment, there was nothing but their ragged breathing, the storm outside, and the sharp, intoxicating awareness of what they'd just done. Kaya lay sprawled on the desk, her hair a mess, lips swollen, skin marked by his mouth. Axon stood braced over her, his hands gripping the desk like it was the only thing keeping him grounded. Neither spoke at first. Finally, he exhaled, voice low, rough. "We crossed a line tonight." She met his gaze, her chest still heaving. "I know." His eyes searched hers, hunting for regret, for hesitation. There was none. "Do you regret it?" he asked. Her answer came without pause. "No." Something inside him loosened at that, relief shadowed by hunger still burning in his eyes. "Neither do I." They didn't name it, didn't define it. The words could come later. Tonight wasn't about labels. Tonight was about the truth neither of them could keep buried anymore. And now that it had broken free, they both knew there was no going back.
Chapter 7. Kyra. The morning after was quieter than Kaya expected. No awkward silences. No sidelong glances as though they'd made a terrible mistake. They'd stayed in his office until almost 3 a.m., finishing nothing of the work they'd planned, the documents scattered and forgotten across the desk. She remembered the way his hand had lingered on her waist, the taste of his mouth still sharp on hers, as she finally slipped into her car. Now, with daylight creeping through her blinds at home, Kaya found herself smiling. Soft, private, and dangerously telling. She told herself it was a one-time lapse. He told himself the same, but neither of them believed it. 2 days later, the first text came. No greeting, just a location and a time. 8:30 p.m., East End Bistro. Ask for the back table. Kaya stared at it for a long moment before replying with a single word. Okay. The restaurant was dimly lit, all warm wood and flickering candles. Their table was tucked behind a half wall, hidden from the main dining area. Axon was already there when she arrived, his suit jacket hanging from the back of his chair, his tie loosened. "You look incredible," he said, standing as she approached. "You're supposed to say that before we sit down," she teased, slipping into her seat. He smiled faintly, but his eyes never left hers. "I'd say it at any moment." Dinner passed in a blur of quiet conversation, low laughter, and subtle touches beneath the table. His hand brushing hers lingering on his arm as she leaned closer. The tension between them was a constant hum, never wavering. When they left, he walked her to her car, the chill of the night air making her step closer. "I don't want the night to end," he said. It didn't. From there, it became a rhythm. A dangerous, intoxicating rhythm. Some nights, it was secluded restaurants. Other nights, long drives to places where no one knew them, remote lookout points with the city spread out in 1,000 glittering lights below. Once, he took her to a small art gallery after hours, the owner a personal friend who didn't ask questions. In those moments, the rest of the world ceased to matter. There was no Robert, no firm, no fragile boundary between them. Just Axon and Kaya, two people who had crossed a line and found something worth the risk. The pull between them wasn't just physical, but the physical was impossible to ignore. The first time it happened was at his penthouse. Kaya had ended up there after an especially long day of tense meetings. It was the first time she'd seen his private world, the floor-to-ceiling windows, shelves of books worn at the spines, a record player quietly spinning something low and smooth in the corner. "You live here alone?" she asked, curling her legs beneath her on the couch. "Always have." He poured them both a glass of wine before settling beside her. "It's easier. No expectations when you walk in the door." "Sounds lonely," she said softly. He looked at her then, something raw passing through his eyes. "Not tonight." The kiss was inevitable. His hand cupped her jaw, his thumb stroking her cheek as he drew her in. She melted into him, the taste of red wine on his tongue, his body heat wrapping around her. One kiss bled into another until she was straddling his lap, her skirt riding up as his hands slid along her thighs. The low rumble of his voice broke against her lips. "Kaya, tell me to stop." Her answer was a whisper, breathless and sure. Don't stop. Clothes became nothing more than obstacles. Her blouse unbuttoned under his impatient fingers, his shirt tugged open, buttons scattering. Her bra hit the floor, his mouth closing over her nipple, drawing a gasp from her throat. He lifted her, carrying her down the hall, lips never leaving hers until her back hit the mattress. His body covered hers, heavy and certain, and when he pushed inside her, slow, deliberate at first, then harder when her nails dug into his shoulders, there was no room left for doubt. Every thrust blurred the line between restraint and need, between what they told themselves they couldn't want and what they both craved. The air filled with the sound of their bodies, her cries mixing with his low groans as he drove them both toward the inevitable. She shattered first, trembling beneath him, her climax tearing through her like fire. He followed with a curse against her neck, his release hot and deep, anchoring them both in the messy, undeniable truth of what they'd started. Afterward, she lay tangled in the sheets, his arm heavy across her waist, their breathing the only sound in the room. Neither of them said the words aloud, but the silence between them made one thing clear. This wasn't just an affair anymore. It was the beginning of something neither of them could walk away from. Overnight stays became common after that. At first, it was accidental. Too late to drive home, too warm to leave the comfort of his bed. Then it became intentional. She left a toothbrush in his bathroom, then a sweater draped over the back of a chair. By the third week, a small drawer in his bedroom was hers. They learned the rhythm of each other's mornings, how she liked her coffee strong with a touch of cinnamon, how he read the news before speaking much, how they both preferred quiet music to start the day. One Tuesday morning, she padded barefoot into his kitchen to find him at the stove, cooking eggs. "You cook?" she asked, eyebrows raised. He smirked without turning. "I'm not completely helpless." She wrapped her arms around him from behind, resting her cheek against his back. "I might be falling for you, Mr. Clare." His hand stilled on the pan. When he turned, there was no trace of his usual guardedness. "Kaya, I think I already have." The words weren't dramatic, weren't followed by sweeping declarations, but they settled between them with the weight of truth. And in the stolen hours they carved out of their lives, that truth only deepened. They talked for hours in the soft glow of his living room, about their childhoods, the decisions that had shaped them, the fears they didn't voice to anyone else. Together, those walls they'd built to protect themselves began to feel less necessary. Still, the reality of the world outside his penthouse never disappeared. They returned to the office each day with the same controlled professionalism, careful not to let their eyes linger too long in meetings, their hands brush in passing. But in the quiet spaces, in the back corner of a restaurant, in the darkened interior of his car parked along a deserted stretch of coast, in the warmth of his bed, they were something else entirely. Something that was beginning to feel less like an affair and more like a love they couldn't yet admit aloud. Chapter 8. Kyra. The city outside Axon's penthouse slept under a blanket of fog, the streetlights glowing in muted halos. Inside, Kaya lay with her head on his chest, her fingertips tracing idle patterns against the hard ridges of his abdomen. Their breaths moved in quiet sync, the only sound the steady drum of rain against the glass walls. But even in that cocoon of warmth, her mind refused to quiet. "What's on your mind?" Axon asked, his voice low, the vibration running through her ear where it rested against him. "The numbers," she murmured. "That new batch of hotel contracts. I triple-checked them, and the discrepancies aren't accidents. Robert isn't sloppy. He's orchestrating something." Axon's chest rose in a long breath beneath her cheek. His hand stilled on her back. "I've been thinking the same." The next morning, the mood in the office shifted. Their affair had become expert in camouflage. No lingering looks in the hallway, no slip of touch when others were near. But behind the blinds of his office, the masks dropped. They bent over contracts, financial statements, and email chains until their heads ached. Slowly, the puzzle sharpened into a picture: wire transfers to ghost corporations, fake consultancy fees, inflated property valuations, and always at the center, Robert Maxwell's signature. Kaya's stomach turned as she held up the last batch of documents. This isn't just fraud. He's siphoning money deliberately, and he's not doing it alone. He's working with Latham. Axon's jaw flexed. Latham? The CEO of the hotel chain. She spread the papers like a blade of proof between them. Phone logs, undisclosed meetings, wire payments into an account tied to Latham's name. It was all there, clean, undeniable. For 2 weeks, they lived in secrecy and adrenaline, working late into the night, shoulders brushing as they leaned over laptops, exhaustion blurring into intimacy. One evening, Kaya rubbed her temples over a spreadsheet, the numbers blurring. Axon came around the desk and set his hands firmly on her shoulders, kneading until she groaned softly. "This is going to bury him," he murmured against her ear. She tilted her head back, meeting his eyes upside down. "And if it doesn't?" "It will." His hands tightened slightly, grounding her. "I don't go to war unless I know I can win." When the moment came, it was surgical. Robert was summoned into Axon's office. Kaya sat silently beside him, the files arranged like weapons across the desk. Robert's eyes darted. "What's this?" "Your work," Axon said coldly, "and your undoing." Robert tried to bluff, but as Axon laid out each piece, transaction by transaction, lie by lie, his bluster frayed. "You can't prove—" Kaya cut across him, her voice steady, sharp as glass. "We already have." By the end of the hour, Robert was white-knuckled, sweating, and escorted from the building by security. The fallout came fast. The board briefed. Legal action filed. Latham implicated. The acquisition dragged back from the edge of ruin. Hours later, Kaya sat in the corner of the conference room, drafting the press statement. Her hand ached from typing, her pulse still high from the storm they'd unleashed. "You did it," Axon said quietly, stepping close. She looked up, her lips curving despite the exhaustion. "We did it." And they had. Together. That night there was no champagne, no toast. He drove her straight to his penthouse, the silence between them thick with something that had been simmering for weeks. The moment the door locked, Axon's restraint snapped. He pinned her to the wall, his mouth claiming hers with bruising hunger. Her hands tore at his shirt, buttons scattering across the hardwood. He hauled her against him, grinding her back into the glass as his mouth dragged down her throat. "God, Kaya," he growled, his breath hot against her skin. Her nails raked his shoulders as he lifted her effortlessly, her legs wrapping around his waist. He carried her to the bedroom, their lips never parting, and dropped her onto the bed with a feral kind of need. Clothes disappeared in frantic handfuls. Skin met skin, hot and urgent, the weeks of tension combusting. His hands gripped her thighs, spreading her wide as he drove into her, pulling a sharp cry from her lips. There was no hesitation, no softness, only raw, consuming release. She met him stroke for stroke, clutching at him as if he were the only thing keeping her from shattering. When it finally broke, it ripped through them both, leaving them breathless, tangled in sheets damp with sweat. Later, as Kaya lay against his chest, Axon brushed her hair from her face and pressed a kiss to her temple. His voice was quiet, stripped bare. "I couldn't have done this without you." Her throat tightened. She looked up at him, eyes soft, and I wouldn't have wanted to do it without you. It wasn't just victory they'd claimed. It wasn't just desire anymore. It was partnership, in every sense of the word.
Chapter 9, Axon. The days after Robert Maxwell's downfall blurred into a storm of headlines, board meetings, and carefully worded press statements. Axon handled the frenzy with his usual precision, but beneath the calm exterior, his thoughts often wandered elsewhere, to Kaya, and to the two young women who had never met her. It was late one evening when the decision came to him, sitting in the quiet of his office. Kaya was curled into the corner of his leather couch, her shoes abandoned, her legs tucked neatly beneath her, as she scrolled through an email on her tablet. The glow from the desk lamp softened the angles of her face, making her look at once brilliant and achingly tender. "I want you to meet my daughters," Axon said, his voice steady though his heart picked up pace. Kaya's head lifted, surprise flickering across her features. "You do?" "I do." He crossed the room, settling beside her. His hand brushed against hers, deliberate, grounding. "They're the most important part of my life. And He hesitated for a breath, uncharacteristically searching for words. "I want them to know you, the real you." Her chest warmed, though nerves tightened in her stomach. Meeting his daughters wasn't just personal. It was a declaration, a line neither of them could retreat from once crossed. "When?" she asked softly. "This weekend. They'll be in the city. I thought we could have dinner here, something simple." She smiled, a little unsteady but genuine. "All right, I'd like that." Saturday evening arrived quicker than Kaya expected. She lingered longer than usual over her closet, weighing outfits with a care she rarely afforded herself. She wanted to strike the right balance, approachable but polished, sophisticated without distance. In the end, she chose a soft cream sweater, dark jeans, and ankle boots. Simple, warm, her. When Axon opened the door, his gaze lingered, appreciative. "You look perfect." "Perfectly terrified," she admitted with a shaky laugh. He touched her cheek, his thumb brushing lightly across her skin. "They're going to love you." At 6 sharp, the doorbell rang. 2 young women stood on the threshold, both carrying their father's sharp jawline and piercing blue eyes. "This is Lily," Axon said, introducing the older one, tall, poised, with an elegance that mirrored her age. "And this is Harper," he added, ruffling the hair of the younger, whose quick grin lit her face with mischief. Kaya stepped forward, offering her hand, but Harper bypassed it entirely, pulling her into a spontaneous hug. "Dad's told us about you." "Has he now?" Kaya replied, amused. "All good things, I hope?" "Mostly," Lily teased, earning a half-serious glare from her father. Dinner was casual, but full of warmth. Axon had cooked, something Kaya quickly learned was a rarity, reserved only for moments that mattered. Over steaming bowls of pasta and fresh bread, conversation flowed easily. Harper quizzed Kaya about her favorite books, leading to a lively debate about whether audiobooks counted. Lily leaned in, fascinated, as Kaya spoke about a trip to Morocco, her eyes alight with memory. At one point, Axon leaned back, silently watching the 3 of them laugh together, and felt something shift deep inside him. This wasn't just attraction or even love. This was the beginning of a life that felt whole. Later, after dessert, Harper roped Kaya into a card game on the living room rug, while Lily drifted into the kitchen to help her father clear the table. She glanced toward the laughter spilling in from the other room, then turned back to him with an easy smile. "She's great," Lily said simply. Axon met his daughter's gaze. His voice was quiet, certain. "Yeah, she is." Lily's knowing look told him she'd seen more in his eyes than he'd said aloud. By the end of the evening, Kaya's nerves had melted into something softer, acceptance, maybe even belonging. Harper hugged her tightly before leaving, while Lily offered a grateful smile. "Thanks for saving Dad from his terrible takeout habit," she said lightly. When the door closed behind them, silence settled over the penthouse. Axon turned to her, searching her face. "Well?" Kaya's smile bloomed, warm and certain. "They're wonderful. You did good, Axon." "No," he corrected, drawing her close. "We did good." Chapter 10. Axon. The Sunday after Axon introduced Kaya to Lily and Harper, his phone buzzed just after breakfast. "I've been thinking," Kaya said when he answered, her tone deliberately casual, too casual. That's usually dangerous, he teased, setting his coffee cup aside. She gave a soft laugh. I think it's time you met my family. Axon stilled. All of them? Yes, she confirmed. My mom's hosting dinner next weekend. It'll be my parents, my brothers, and my aunt. Maybe a cousin or two if word gets out. They have a way of just appearing when something important's happening. He could practically hear her air quotes through the phone. Axon leaned back in his chair, fingers drumming lightly against the armrest. That's a lot of people. They're going to love you, she said warmly, though there was an undercurrent of nerves even in her reassurance. But I should warn you, they're not shy. They'll ask questions, lots of them. Questions I can handle, he replied, though unease prickled at the back of his mind. It's the answers that might get me into trouble. Her smile colored her voice. Relax, Axon. Just be yourself. By Saturday evening, those 3 words, just be yourself, felt deceptively simple. Axon stood outside Kaya's childhood home, a craftsman-style house tucked into a leafy neighborhood. Its wide porch lit warmly against the summer dusk. Laughter spilled from the open windows, underscored by the faint clink of glasses and the scent of roasted chicken drifting into the night air. Kaya slipped her hand into his, grounding him. Ready? Define ready, he muttered, earning a soft squeeze from her fingers. Inside, the house was alive with warmth and noise. The walls were dotted with family photos. School portraits, graduations, vacations, moments captured in mismatched frames that spoke of love rather than design. The smell of herbs and butter filled the air, mingling with voices layered on top of one another in easy harmony. Introductions came quickly, almost overwhelmingly. Her mother, Denise, graceful with the same warm brown eyes Kaya had inherited. Her father, Marcus, tall, solid, his handshake firm, his presence steady. Jason, her older brother, sized Axon up with the wary protectiveness of someone who had made it his life's mission to guard his sister. Aaron, the younger brother, was all quick grins and easy charm. And Aunt Lila swept him into a hug so tight it startled him. You must be Axon, Denise said, holding his hand between both of hers. Only the good parts, I hope, Axon replied, with a polite but genuine smile. Her father gave a single nod, his deep voice carrying authority. Come in, son. Let's eat before your mother fusses. Dinner was vibrant, the conversation layered and fast-moving, like a tide that pulled Axon into its current, whether he was ready or not. He found himself laughing more easily than he expected, nudged along by Denise's warmth and Lila's mischievous humor. What was your first impression of Kaya? Aunt Lila asked, eyes twinkling over her wine glass. Axon glanced at Kaya, who raised her brow in warning. That she was brilliant, and that I was in trouble, he admitted. The table erupted with laughter, Kaya groaning while her aunt clapped her hands in delight. Jason, however, leaned forward, his gaze sharp. And how much older are you, exactly? Kaya shot her brother a glare. Jason. It's fine, Axon said calmly, meeting the young man's eyes without flinching. I'm 20 years older. Silence lingered for a beat, waited but not hostile. Then Marcus spoke, his tone firm but not unkind. Age doesn't matter as much as character. And from what I can see, you've got the right kind. Relief loosened something in Axon's chest. After dinner, Kaya brothers ushered him into the living room for a game of pool. The ribbing started immediately. Questions about whether he followed sports, whether he could cook, whether he'd ever beaten anyone at pool before. Beneath the teasing, though, Axon felt something subtle shifting, an edge of acceptance taking root. Kaya, helping her mother and aunt in the kitchen, leaned against the counter as her mother slid a tray into the dishwasher. From the doorway, laughter spilled in from the living room, where Axon bent over the pool table, Aaron cheering when he sank a shot. He's good for you, Denise said quietly, joining her daughter at the counter. Kaya's throat tightened. He really is. Her mother squeezed her haunt, her voice soft but sure. That's all we care about. When the night wound down, hugs and handshakes lingered at the door. Aunt Lila pressed a foil-wrapped bundle into Axon's hand with a wink. For later. Trust me, you'll thank me. In the car, Kaya unwrapped the foil to reveal a generous slice of her aunt's famous sweet potato pie. Axon took a bite and closed his eye, groaning appreciatively. I think your aunt just secured my loyalty for life, he said around a mouthful. Kaya laughed, her hand resting lightly on his knee. Congratulations, you've officially been adopted. He glanced at her, his expression softening in a way that made her chest ache. Feels good, Kaya. Feels right. And he knew, as they drove away from the house, that this wasn't just another milestone. Both of their families now knew. Both had embraced them. Forever no longer felt like a fragile hope. It felt inevitable. Chapter 11. Axon. The weeks after meeting each other's families were golden. Sundays sometimes meant brunch with Axon's daughters, who had grown comfortable enough with Kaya to send her texts in the middle of the week. Funny memes from Harper, book recommendations from Lily. Fridays were dinner with Kaya at her favorite bistro, a table tucked away in the back corner where they could laugh without anyone watching. Weeknights were for the quiet rituals they had fallen into, sharing a glass of wine in his kitchen while Kaya prepped vegetables and Axon seared steaks, or lying tangled together on his couch while a movie played in the background, neither of them really watching. It was a rhythm that felt easy, familiar, almost like a life they had been living all along but had only just discovered. But despite the rhythm, despite the warmth, one thing remained constant. The outside world didn't know about them. Not really. It wasn't a matter of shame, Axon told himself. It was strategy. He'd lived long enough in the public eye to know how quickly whispers could spread. His name carried weight in his industry, and in circles that thrived on gossip, people loved nothing more than a scandal to pick apart. The people in his orbit had long memories and sharper tongues. A rumor could travel through the boardroom before the truth even tied its shoes. He wanted to shield Kaya from that, or at least that's what he told himself. The first ripple came on a Wednesday afternoon. Axon was reviewing a financial report when his assistant poked her head into his office. "Your sister's here. She says it's urgent." He straightened immediately. Dana rarely used the word urgent unless it was. A storm in heels, she swept into his office moments later, immaculately dressed, eyes sharp, her presence filling the room like a cold front. "Do you have a minute?" she asked, though it wasn't really a question. Axon closed the file in front of him and gestured to the chair opposite. "What's on your mind?" "I've been hearing things," she began, crossing one leg over the other. Her bracelets clinked softly, the only sound besides her voice. "About you. And a woman. One of your employees." His jaw tightened. "Kaya." "Yes, Kaya." Dana's tone wrapped the name in skepticism, like she was testing the taste of it and finding it bitter. "Do you really think it's wise to get involved with someone who works for you? Someone younger? She's not a risk. She's—" "Axon." Dana's eyes narrowed, unflinching. "I'm not here to fight. But let's be honest. A woman like that, beautiful, ambitious, why else would she be with you if not for your bank account?" The words landed like a slap, sharp and stinging. He stared at her, disbelief and anger coiling tight in his chest. "That's not who she is." "You think you know her," Dana countered smoothly, "but you've known her for what? Months? People can wear masks for years if it benefits them. I'm your sister. I've seen people come and go, using your name, your money, your connections. I'm just trying to protect you." "Kaya is not one of them," he said, his voice low, firm, but with a strain that hadn't been there before. Dana stood, smoothing down her skirt. "Maybe, but until you can be absolutely sure, I'd think twice about parading her around. People talk, and once they start, you can't take it back." The door clicked shut behind her, but her words lingered like smoke in the air. Axon told himself he knew Kaya's heart. He knew her laughter wasn't calculated, her touch wasn't transactional, her loyalty wasn't for sale. She had stood by him through scandal and upheaval, not once asking what she stood to gain. And yet, Dana's warning had planted a seed. Not a doubt in Kaya herself, but an awareness of the optics, of how the world would see them. He started thinking twice before bringing her to events. Once or twice became habit. At a charity gala the following weekend, he told her it would be better if she skipped it. Too much press, too many people who didn't need to be speculating. She smiled and said she understood, but he caught the flicker in her eyes before she turned away. Kaya noticed more than he realized. It began subtly. Invitations that never came, stories about business functions she used to hear about in detail now mentioned only in passing. He was still warm, still attentive in private, but there was a carefulness in the way he spoke about his world, as though keeping her at arm's length from it. And for the first time, she felt like she didn't fully belong in his life. One Thursday evening, they sat together in his penthouse, the city lights stretching endlessly beyond the glass walls. He nursed a drink while she curled against the arm of the sofa, watching him more than the skyline. "Are you hiding me?" she asked softly. The question landed between them, fragile and sharp, impossible to ignore. Axon set his glass down slowly. "I'm protecting you." "From what?" Her voice was calm, but her eyes were searching. "From people who might not understand us. From unnecessary drama. From whispers that turn into headlines." She tilted her head slightly, her voice even quieter. "Or from people who might not approve." His chest tightened. He exhaled, looking away. "It's complicated, Kaya." "It always is," she murmured. She stood, gathering the empty glasses, and carried them into the kitchen. He didn't stop her, and she didn't push further. The sound of running water filled the silence. She rinsed the glasses with steady hands, but inside, questions churned. How long could a relationship thrive in the shadows? She didn't need public declarations or flashy gestures. She didn't need her face on the cover of a magazine, or to be introduced as his +1 at every gala. But she needed to feel seen, to feel like she wasn't just part of his private world, tucked away where no one could touch her, but too risky to show. And somewhere deep down, she feared that if they kept hiding, the world outside their bubble wouldn't just knock at the door. It would eventually tear it apart.
Chapter 12. Kyra. The first mention of the fundraiser came in passing. It was a Thursday evening, the scent of garlic and simmering tomatoes filling Axon's kitchen. His tie was loosened, sleeves rolled up, posture more relaxed than most ever saw him. Kaya moved easily beside him, plating the pasta she had made, humming under her breath to the soft jazz playing through the speakers. "Next weekend is the Whitmore Children's Fund Gala," he said casually, almost as though it were an afterthought. "Black tie. It's one of those events that just comes with the territory." Kaya set down the serving spoon, wiping her hands on a towel. "Sounds fancy." "It is." His smile was faint, tinged with something she couldn't quite name. "But it's for a good cause. They raise millions every year for underprivileged kids. I've been on the donor board for years." She hesitated, keeping her tone light. "So am I going to need to find a gown?" The question hung in the air. He didn't answer right away, and in the small pause, Kaya felt her chest tighten. "I'm not sure," he finally said, careful, deliberate. "It's a lot of press. A lot of people watching. Might be overwhelming." Her brows lifted, though her voice stayed calm. "Overwhelming for who? Me or you?" His eyes flickered to hers, but instead of answering, he reached for his wine glass, taking a measured sip. "Let's just talk about it later." For the next few days, Kaya told herself not to push. Maybe he needed time. Maybe later meant he'd come around, that he'd realize how much it mattered to her. Still, her thoughts betrayed her. In between work meetings and coffee runs, she found herself scrolling through boutique websites, eyeing gowns that whispered of belonging. Sleek satin, flowing chiffon, elegant without shouting for attention. She imagined walking in beside him, standing at his side with her head held high, not as an accessory, as his. When she finally brought it up again, they were curled together on his sofa, the city's night skyline sprawling behind them like a jeweled curtain. His arm was draped around her, his thumb idly tracing circles against her skin. It should have been one of those easy, perfect nights. "I was looking at gowns today," she said softly, watching him out of the corner of her eye. "Something simple, elegant. I thought maybe." He sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose, cutting her words short. "Kaya!" And there it was, that tone, the one that already carried the weight of refusal. "I just think it might be too soon," he said, voice low but firm. "Too public." Her stomach dropped. "Too soon? Axon, we've been together for months. I've met your daughters. I've met your family. How is that not serious enough? It's not about seriousness, he countered quickly, leaning forward as though to ground the conversation. It's about optics. People at that fundraiser, they're not just donors, they're connected. Media will be there. Photos, articles, speculation. I just want to protect what we have for a little longer. She stared at him, heat rising in her chest, the warmth draining from her face. You mean hide it a little longer? That's not fair, he said sharply, his composure cracking just enough to reveal the tension underneath. Isn't it? Because from where I'm standing, it feels like you're ashamed of me. The words hit like a strike and she saw it. The flinch in his shoulders, the way his eyes darkened as though she pierced something raw. You know that's not true, he said quietly. Do I? She whispered, the question slipping out before she could stop it. Neither spoke after that. The silence felt jagged, unyielding, as though the city itself had leaned in to listen. The night of the fundraiser arrived faster than Kaya expected. She told Axon she had plans with a friend, though the truth was she couldn't bring herself to see anyone. Instead, she stayed home in her apartment, curled up on the couch beneath a blanket. A glass of untouched wine sat on the coffee table beside her. She told herself not to look at social media. She even turned her phone face down, ignoring the soft vibration of notifications. But temptation had teeth, and by 9 o'clock, she found herself scrolling through tagged photos anyway. There he was, Axon Clare, in a flawless black tuxedo that sharpened every edge of his already striking presence. He stood poised, polished, his hand resting lightly on the arm of a sleek blonde woman from the donor board, both of them smiling for the cameras. Kaya knew the woman was married, knew it was just a formality, the kind of meaningless posed photo expected at such events. Rationally, she understood, but logic didn't soften the blow. All Kaya could see was that someone else stood beside him in the space she had wanted, needed, to occupy. Her chest tightened as she scrolled past more photos, each one a reminder of what she wasn't allowed to share. She tossed the phone aside and pressed her face into the blanket, but the sting remained. When he came by her apartment the next day, she opened the door but didn't step aside right away. You looked nice last night, she said evenly, her tone calm but cutting. Kaya, I mean it, she interrupted, holding his gaze. Tux suited you. And your date looked great too. His jaw tightened. It wasn't a date. It was formality. You know that. What I know, she replied, folding her arms across her chest, is that you went to one of the most important nights of your year, and you didn't want me there. And you can dress it up however you want. Optics, timing, protection. But it still feels like a rejection. He exhaled, dragging a hand through his hair, eyes clouded with something between regret and frustration. I didn't mean to hurt you. But you did, she said simply. The silence that followed was heavy, taut, as though the air itself had thinned. Neither of them moved. Neither of them broke. And though they stood only a breath apart, Kaya had never felt further from him.
Chapter 13. Axon. The morning after the fundraiser felt like a hangover, except no amount of coffee could clear the heaviness pressing in on both of them. Axon sat at the small round table in Kaya's apartment, his suit jacket draped carelessly over the chair beside him, his tie shoved into his pocket. A cooling cup of coffee sat in front of him, untouched. He kept his hands wrapped around it anyway, as though the porcelain might anchor him. Kaya moved around the kitchen with a brisk efficiency that wasn't really about efficiency at all. The sharp clink of her mug against the counter, the slam of the cupboard door. It was all deliberate, loud in a way her silence wasn't. Every sound was a word she wasn't saying. Every movement was the space between them widening. Axon watched her in the small glow of morning light, filtering through the blinds. Her hair was twisted up messily, her expression guarded, her back rigid. He wanted to say something, but every phrase he rehearsed in his mind sounded flimsy, weak, inadequate. Finally, Kaya broke the silence. "You didn't have to come over," she said, her voice clipped, her eyes on the pan she was rinsing. "I wanted to see you," he said, and he meant it. He wanted to see her, to explain, to somehow rewind the last 24 hours. Her laugh came out short and humorless. "You wanted to see me now that the cameras are gone?" His jaw tightened. "That's not fair." "Not fair?" She turned fully to face him, arms folded across her chest, her stance like a wall. "You went to that fundraiser without me, Axon. You didn't even let me decide if I could handle it. You decided I couldn't. I was protecting you," he said, leaning forward, voice rougher than he meant. "Kaya, you don't understand the level of—" "No," she snapped, cutting him off like a whip crack. "Don't hide behind that. This isn't about protecting me. This is about protecting you, your image, your reputation, your comfort." The words hit him with a weight he didn't want to admit. His silence gave her the confirmation she feared. Her voice softened then, but it was sharper still, piercing in its honesty. "You've brought me into your bed, into your home, even into your family, but not into your world, and I need to know why. Why are you ashamed of me?" "I'm not ashamed," he said quickly, desperately. "Kaya, you know that's not true." "Then what is it?" Her voice trembled, though her gaze held steady. "Because right now, it feels like you're happy to have me in private, but not in public, and I'm not some secret you keep because it's easier." Her eyes glistened now, and the sight of it split something inside him. He wanted to close the space between them, but his fear, cold, familiar, rooted him to his chair. And then she said the words that shifted the ground beneath them. "I love you, Axon." The admission hung in the air like thunder, charged and irreversible. She stepped closer, her voice breaking even as she held his gaze. "I love you. I didn't plan it. I didn't even want it to happen. But it's the truth. I love you. And I need to know if you want the same thing, or if this is just some beautiful, hidden thing that's convenient for you." His heart lurched violently at her confession. Every part of him wanted to grab her, to kiss her, to tell her he loved her too, to surrender. But the other part, the louder, harder part that had ruled his life for decades, rose up like armor. The part that kept him careful, that whispered about risk, about optics, about the way the world could strip him bare if he let them see too much. Fear twisted into something sharp and ugly. "You think love fixes everything?" His voice came out cold, sharper than he intended. "You think saying those words means I'm supposed to throw away caution and parade you around like—" Her breath caught, her eyes narrowing. "Like what?" He swallowed hard, but the wrong words fell out anyway. "Like you're permanent." The second they slipped from his lips, he knew they'd land like a blade. Kaya froze. Her face went still, her breath stuttered. "Permanent," she echoed, her voice fragile, disbelieving. "So, that's how you see me. Temporary. Disposable." "That's not what I meant," he started, his chest constricting. "Then what did you mean?" He opened his mouth, but nothing came. His fear had already spoken for him. She shook her head slowly, as if seeing something she hadn't wanted to believe until now. "You just made it very clear, Axon." She took a step back, then another. Each inch of distance between them felt like a canyon opening. "Get out," she said quietly, her voice steadier than he expected. "Kaya, get out." The finality in her tone was like a slammed door before the real one even closed. He stood, his body aching with the need to reach for her, to take it back, to fix it. But his pride and his fear held him back. Always his fear. The soft click of her apartment door shutting behind him was the loudest sound he had ever heard.
Chapter 14. Kyra. Kaya woke to gray light filtering through her blinds, her head heavy and her chest aching as if she'd been hollowed out during the night. Sleep had been shallow, fractured by dreams that were not really dreams, just the memory of his voice, cold and sharp, echoing again and again, like you're permanent. Those words replayed on a cruel loop, each repetition stripping away another fragment of the hope she'd once carried for them. They lodged beneath her skin like splinters, impossible to ignore no matter how still she lay. She stayed motionless for a long time, staring at the cracks in her ceiling as if they might offer answers. The air felt stale. Her phone sat silent on the nightstand. its black screen reflecting her tired face. No message, no call. She hadn't expected one. Not really. But some foolish, bruised part of her had still hoped. When she finally got up, she moved through her apartment like someone navigating unfamiliar terrain. Every step felt heavy, every room emptier than she remembered. She brewed coffee she couldn't drink, let it go cold on the counter, dressed in clothes she didn't recall choosing. By the time she stepped out into the brisk morning, her shoulders were already hunched, not just against the wind, but against the ache she carried in her chest. At work, the familiar rhythm that once buoyed her felt suffocating. The office, once charged with an energy between them that had been impossible to ignore, was now sterile. The air itself seemed to resist her. She buried herself in files and spreadsheets and anything that demanded more focus than her own heart. She felt him before she saw him. Her spine stiffened the moment Axon entered the floor, though she never once lifted her gaze. Their eyes didn't meet. Their exchanges, when strictly necessary, were clipped, clinical, colleagues performing roles. "Could you forward me the updated report?" "It's already in your inbox." No warmth, no smile, just words stripped of the intimacy that once threaded between them. And though no one dared to ask, she knew people noticed. She could feel their glances, the silent curiosity simmering in the air. Kaya pretended not to notice, but inside she burned with humiliation. Axon had thought he knew regret. He had been wrong. The moment the door had closed behind him, silence filling the space where her voice had been, he'd felt it, a weight crushing down on his chest. He had gone home with every intention of calling her, of apologizing, of undoing the damage. But each drafted message felt hollow. Every time his thumb hovered over her name in his phone, panic surged. What words could possibly undo the truth she had heard in his voice? It wasn't that he didn't know what to say. He knew exactly. He just didn't know how to make her believe it. Now, every day was a slow bleed. Seeing her move through the office without looking at him was torture. Her silence was louder than any argument. At least when she had shouted, when her eyes had burned, there had been life between them. An ache, but one that still meant she cared enough to fight. This emptiness was worse. At night, he replayed the argument like a punishment. He remembered the way her face had shifted when he'd spoken those careless words, how the light had drained, how her shoulders had gone still. He had watched her heart fracture in real time, and the image haunted him long after the city outside his window had gone quiet. Kaya told herself she didn't miss him. She repeated it like a prayer, though her heart betrayed her daily. She drowned herself in deadlines, in long hours, in routine. But no matter how fiercely she worked, she couldn't escape the moments that gutted her. The trace of his cologne lingering in the hall after he passed, the sound of his low voice drifting from a conference room, the way his laugh, so rare, so guarded, sometimes echoed faintly across the floor. Each reminder cracked her resolve. She hated that she still felt him everywhere, hated that her body remembered what her mind tried to erase. Axon, for his part, buried himself in work with equal ruthlessness. But even victories felt hollow now. Every deal closed, every figure balanced, every win. None of it mattered without her smile across the table, without her sharp wit to challenge him, to ground him, to remind him he was more than the image he curated for the world. He told himself he was giving her space, that it was noble, that it was what she needed. But the truth was simpler, crueler. He was a coward. He didn't know how to fix this, didn't know if he even could. And every day that passed, he felt her slipping further away. One evening, long after most of the office had emptied, Kaya sat alone at her desk, the city beyond the glass fractured into diamonds of light. Her eyes burned from hours staring at the screen, but she kept typing, desperate to keep her hands busy, her thoughts tethered. She didn't notice him until his voice broke the silence. Working late? Her fingers stilled, but she didn't look up. Deadlines don't care about office hours. He lingered in the doorway, his presence thick in the quiet. Kaya, see, I'm busy, she cut in, her tone flat, final. The words struck harder than she intended, but she didn't take them back. Couldn't. If she looked at him, if she let herself hear the softness in his voice, she feared she would crumble. He stood there a moment longer, then stepped back. She heard his retreating footsteps, then the quiet click of the door. And though she didn't cry, though she didn't move, the ache in her chest spread like fire. By the end of the month, the distance between them had become something dangerous, too wide to ignore, too painful to cross. Each carried the weight of what had been lost, but neither dared to reach across the chasm. Kaya told herself she could live without him, that her heart would eventually forget the shape of his, that love could be silenced if she buried it deep enough.
Chapter 15. Axon. Axon had thought time might dull the ache, that if he buried himself in work, endless reports, strategy meetings, client calls, if he kept his head down and forced himself not to linger when she passed by his office door, the sharp edge of missing her would soften. It hadn't. If anything, the absence had carved deeper into him. Kaya's silence had become a constant hum in the back of his mind, louder than the ringing phones, louder than the boardroom chatter. Every day she avoided him. Every time her voice came out clipped and cool, it pressed the weight of his mistake harder into his chest. Regret wasn't an emotion anymore. It was oxygen. He breathed it in. He carried it with him everywhere. And still, he didn't know how to fix what he had broken. The firm's annual autumn networking gala should have been the kind of event Axon breezed through without a second thought. A luxury hotel ballroom had been reserved. Champagne towers gleamed beneath the chandelier light, and polished professionals clustered into tight circles, trading industry gossip and corporate promises. This was his world, the world where he excelled, shaking hands, swapping business cards, building alliances with a smile and a measured word. Tonight, though, his mood was off before he even stepped inside. He had nearly convinced himself to skip. Too many people, too many eyes, and worst of all, the gnawing possibility of seeing Kaya across the room in a dress that would undo what little control he had left. But in the end, duty won. Appearance was everything in his position. His absence would spark whispers, and the last thing he needed was more speculation about him, about her. So, he told himself it would be just another event. He could keep his distance. He could stay professional. He could resist the way his heart twisted itself into knots at the thought of her. That illusion shattered the second he saw her. Kaya stood near the center of the room, her posture poised and elegant. The golden light from the chandeliers spilled into her hair, setting it aglow. She wore a deep sapphire dress that hugged her curves with understated grace, the fabric glinting like starlight when she shifted. Her laughter, soft, melodic, and far too rare these days, floated above the low hum of conversation. And it wasn't for him. She was talking to a man he didn't recognize. Tall, sharply dressed, confident enough to lean just a little too close when he spoke. Kaya smiled at something he said, and her expression softened in that way Axon had starved for. An ease, a warmth he hadn't been allowed near in weeks. The sight hit him like a punch to the sternum. For weeks he had been deprived of her, starved of her laughter, her quick wit, the way her eyes lit with intelligence when she was engaged. And now she was offering all of that to someone else. A primal surge roared through him before he could stop it. His jaw clenched, his pulse pounded. A rational voice whispered that he had no right, that they weren't together, that she owed him nothing. But the raw, unfiltered voice in his chest was louder. She's mine. He didn't remember making the decision to move. His body carried him across the room, cutting through the crowd until he stood only a few steps away. The man turned, polite curiosity flickering across his face, completely oblivious to the storm brewing in Axon's chest. Kaya. His voice was low, tight. She blinked, her easy smile faltering as her eyes landed on him. Axon. The man glanced between them, reading the tension in the air. I'll, grab another drink. He excused himself quickly, slipping away into the crowd, leaving silence in his wake. Kaya folded her arms loosely across her stomach, her chin tilting the slightest degree. What the hell was that? Her tone was deceptively even, but her eyes, sharp, unyielding, held fire. I could ask you the same, Axon said, stepping closer than was wise. His voice carried a heat he hadn't meant to reveal, but it was too late to reel it back. Who is he? Her brows lifted in disbelief. A new associate. We were talking about a case. Not that it's any of your business. It's my business when you're... He cut himself off, the rest of the sentence strangling in his throat. He had no claim on her, no right to dictate who she spoke to, or how close another man stood. Her eyes narrowed. When I'm what? Talking to someone who isn't you? The truth of it twisted like a knife in his gut. No, he had no right. He had made sure of that when he had let fear drive his words weeks ago, but knowing it didn't stop the ache from consuming him. The thought of her offering her attention, her smile, her laughter to anyone else was unbearable. I don't like seeing you with him, he admitted finally, his voice rough. Kaya's laugh came soft, almost a whisper, but stripped of humor. You don't like seeing me with him, but you had no problem not being seen with me at all. The words landed like a slap. He flinched, chest tightening. Kaya, no. She shook her head, her voice steady, though her eyes glistened with something sharper than anger. You don't get to do this. You don't get to push me away, to pretend I don't matter, to avoid me for weeks, and then show up jealous because another man talked to me. I was wrong, he said quickly, before she could leave him standing there. The words tumbled out raw, unpolished, but real. I was wrong about everything. I was scared, and I let that fear ruin something His throat tightened, but he forced it out. Something I can't stop wanting. Her breath caught almost imperceptibly, but her expression remained guarded. You can't just show up now and expect me to forget the way you made me feel. I'm not asking you to forget. He took another step closer, his voice dropping to a whisper, meant for her alone. I'm asking you to hear me. I was a coward. I thought keeping you out of my public life would protect you, would protect me, but all it did was destroy us. And seeing you with him tonight, he stopped, jaw taut, the words grating against his restraint. It made me realize I'm done being afraid. I can't lose you, Kaya. For a long moment, the noise of the ballroom seemed to vanish. The space between them crackled like a live wire. She studied him, her expression unreadable, her silence heavier than any accusation. Finally, she spoke. Her voice was soft, but each word cut clean. You already did. Then she turned, her dress brushing past him as she walked away, disappearing into the swell of bodies and conversation. Axon stood frozen, the ballroom noise rushing back in around him, distant and muffled. For the first time in his life, he felt what it meant to truly panic. Not in the boardroom, not in negotiations, not with contracts worth billions on the line, but in love. And this time, he didn't know if even all his power, all his determination, would be enough to undo what his fear had cost him. Chapter 16. Axon. Axon didn't sleep that night. He lay awake in his penthouse, staring at the ceiling, as the city lights bled through the curtains. His chest felt hollow, yet unbearably heavy at the same time. Every sound from the street below seemed to echo Kaya's voice, her laugh with that man, the sharp edge of her words when she told him he had already lost her, the finality in the way she turned her back on him. It gnawed at him, burrowing deeper than any wound he had ever endured in business or in life. He had been humiliated before. He had lost deals, lost respect, even lost battles in court. None of that compared to losing Kaya, because losing her wasn't a sting to his pride, it was devastation. He had told himself for weeks that it was better this way, that the distance would protect them both, that burying himself in work, in meetings, in the relentless rhythm of his empire would keep him from needing her like air, but no amount of money or power could soften the ache of being without her. The silence between them wasn't silence at all, it was a roar, drowning out everything else. And now, he knew the truth he had been running from. He loved her, not in the shallow, fleeting way he had thought himself capable of. Not in a way he could turn off when it became inconvenient. No, he loved her with a ferocity that terrified him, because it made him vulnerable. It stripped him of control. But fear was nothing compared to this emptiness. That wall he had built between them, it was coming down. Tonight. The next evening, he didn't give himself time to overthink. He didn't text, he didn't call. If he gave Kaya even a moment's notice, she might tell him not to come. And he couldn't risk another rejection, not when his entire future felt like it hinged on this one conversation. When he stood outside her apartment door, his heart was hammering hard enough that he wondered if she'd hear it before she even opened. He raised his hand and knocked once, twice, steady but firm. Moments passed, each one stretching like a lifetime. Then the door cracked open. Her face appeared, framed by the warm glow of the lamp inside. Surprise flickered first in her eyes, then suspicion. Within seconds, her expression closed off, guarded. Axon. Her voice was calm, clipped, as though she had rehearsed for this moment. Kaya. He swallowed, his throat tight. Can I come in? Please, I need to say something. And I need you to hear me before you decide you're done for good. For a moment, she didn't move. Her gaze searched his face, no doubt weighing the wisdom of letting him in against the risk of reopening wounds he'd left raw. Finally, with a small sigh, she stepped aside. You have 5 minutes, she said. It wasn't much, but it was enough. He stepped inside, the familiar scent of her space enveloping him. Vanilla and something floral. The comfort of it twisted the knife deeper in his chest. She stayed standing, arms crossed, body angled defensively, as though bracing for another blow. Axon drew in a breath. I've been a damn fool. His voice was low, rough, unpolished in a way it rarely was. I thought keeping you hidden was protecting both of us. From my sister's opinions, from the press, from the whispers I knew, would come the second we went public. I told myself I was shielding you, but the truth is, I was shielding myself. I was being a coward. Kaya's eyes softened, barely, but she stayed quiet. I hurt you, he continued, his voice thick. Not just at the fundraiser, not just by keeping you out of my public life. I hurt you with the things I said that night, things I didn't mean, things I regret every damn day. His chest heaved as he forced the words out. I was scared of how much you mean to me, scared of what loving you could cost me, and instead of facing it, I ran. I pushed you away because it was easier than admitting that He faltered, then pressed on. That I love you. Her breath caught, her arms slowly lowering to her sides. I love you, Kaya, he said again, firmer this time. I've been in love with you longer than I'll admit, and it terrifies me. But losing you terrifies me more. I can't live like this anymore, without you, pretending I'm fine when I'm not. You're it for me. Kaya's lips parted slightly, her chest rising and falling with uneven breaths. You love me? Completely, he said. Recklessly. Hopelessly. And I'm done hiding it. I don't care about my sister's opinions. I don't care about the press. I don't care about anyone but you. I want to stand with you, openly, proudly. No shadows, no locked doors. She stared at him, searching his face as if peeling back layers. She wanted to believe him. God, part of her already did. But the scars he left weren't healed so easily. Why now? She asked softly. Why after everything? Because last night, he said, his jaw tightening, watching you with him, watching someone else get your smile. It nearly destroyed me. I realized I'd rather face every ugly headline, every judgmental glance, every ounce of disapproval, than live another day knowing I lost you because I was too afraid. Silence filled the room, heavy and fragile. Kaya's throat felt tight, her chest aching with the weight of everything unsaid between them. She had dreamed of this moment, of him admitting what she already knew in her bones. But dreams didn't carry scars. Dreams didn't remember what it felt like to be shoved into the shadows. I won't lie, Axon, she said finally, her voice trembling. You hurt me more than I thought possible. You made me feel like I wasn't enough to stand beside you, like I was something to be ashamed of. That doesn't just go away because you showed up with declarations and apologies. His eyes glistened, though he refused to look away. I know. And I don't expect forgiveness tonight. I don't expect you to forget. I'm asking for a chance to prove it, to show you that I'm not that man anymore, that I'll never make you feel hidden again. Her eyes searched his, and for the first time in weeks, she saw it, the truth, the raw sincerity, the man she loved, stripped of his defenses, terrified of losing her. You really mean it? She whispered. No more hiding? None, he swore. I want the world to know you're mine. Every gala, every meeting, every fundraiser, I'll stand right beside you and dare anyone to tell me you don't belong there." His voice softened. "Because you do. You always have." Kaya exhaled, her shoulders sagging as the walls around her heart began to tremble. "You make it sound so simple." "It won't be," he admitted, "but nothing worth it ever is. I'd rather fight every battle by your side than live peacefully without you." Her lips quirked, a faint smile breaking through her tears. "You're stubborn." He stepped closer, his hand brushing against hers, tentative but hopeful. "Only about the things worth fighting for." And then she let herself lean into him, the dam breaking. His arms wrapped around her instantly, like they were meant to, like no amount of distance or silence could erase the way they fit. "I love you too," she whispered against his chest, her voice breaking. "But if you ever make me feel hidden again, Axon, I swear I'll walk away and never look back." He pulled away just enough to cup her face, his forehead pressed to hers. "You won't have to. Not ever again." They talked for hours, about the fundraiser, about his sister, about every fear and insecurity that had poisoned what they had. They laid it bare, tears mixing with laughter, silences filled with touch rather than words. For the first time, there was no hiding, no pretending, just truth. By the time the night had faded into dawn, they weren't just back together, they were stronger. Kaya, curled against him on the couch, looked up with soft, wary hope. "We're really doing this?" Axon kissed the top of her head, his voice steady. "We're doing this. All in. No shadows. Let the world watch." She smiled into his chest, her heart lighter than it had been in months. Whatever storms came next, she wasn't afraid, not anymore. Because this time, they would face them together, and that, he thought, was worth everything. Epilogue. Axon. The city skyline glittered like scattered diamonds across the velvet night sky. The ballroom's tall windows framed it in all its brilliance, but no one was watching the view. All eyes turned toward the couple entering through the grand double doors. Axon had always commanded a room. His name carried weight, his fortune a shadow that followed him everywhere. But tonight, no one saw the billionaire. They saw the man, his hand firmly holding the hand of the woman beside him, his gaze locked on her as if she were the only person in existence. Kaya. She was radiant in a deep emerald gown that skimmed the floor, her curls tumbling freely over her shoulders, her smile luminous. She didn't need diamonds or glittering accessories to shine. She carried something rarer, something untouchable, the light of a woman who was fully, unapologetically loved. The whispers started instantly, traveling like a current across the ballroom. "Is that her? She's stunning. So young." "Not what I expected." Axon heard every word. For once he didn't care. He lifted Kaya's hand and brushed his lips across her knuckles with deliberate tenderness, a gesture for all to see. Let them whisper, let them stare. He had spent too long hiding the best thing that had ever happened to him. Tonight, there would be no shadows. Kaya leaned close, her voice teasing against his ear. "Still breathing?" He chuckled, low and real. "Barely. You're too stunning. They'll all know I don't deserve you." Her eyes glittered with humor, and something even stronger, conviction. "Good. Let them know." It had been weeks since the night he'd stood at her door with his heart in his hands, raw with regret and finally unafraid to confess the truth. Since then, they had rebuilt their love, piece by piece, through late-night talks that stretched until dawn, tearful apologies, and promises that no longer wavered under pressure. Tonight was proof that he had kept his word. The fundraiser was as high profile as they came, attended by the city's elite, politicians, business magnates, socialites. It was the exact stage he had once dreaded, the very arena where he'd hidden her in fear of judgment. Now she was beside him, undeniable, and for the first time, Axon didn't feel like a man under scrutiny. He felt like a man finally whole. Kaya was her usual self, warm, witty, effortlessly disarming. She charmed board members with her intelligence, coaxed laughter from women who rarely let their masks slip, and spoke passionately about the causes the fundraiser supported. Her compassion wrapped around every word she said, shining brighter than chandeliers above them. And then Axon saw his sister, the woman who had once planted seeds of doubt in his mind, who had called Kaya unworthy, who had threatened the fragile beginnings of their relationship with her sharp tongue. His chest tightened, but Kaya's hand squeezed his, grounding him. His sister approached slowly. Her expression was still guarded, but absent of malice. She studied Kaya for a long moment. Finally, her voice was low but steady. "You've changed him." Kaya's smile was gentle but unwavering. "He changed himself." I just reminded him what he was capable of. Something shifted in his sister's gaze. Not full acceptance, but the beginning of it. And for Axon, that was enough. Later, when the orchestra swelled and guests spilled onto the dance floor, Kaya turned to him with eyes shimmering in the glow of chandeliers. "Dance with me." "You'll regret that," he warned, with mock seriousness. "I'm terrible." She arched an eyebrow. "That's not the Axon I know." "He doesn't run from challenges." He laughed and pulled her close. His steps were clumsy, but Kaya only smiled, resting her head against his chest. The world fell away as they swayed together, her body fitting against his like it had always belonged there. In that moment, if time had stopped, neither of them would have minded. Months passed. Their love deepened in ways neither could have predicted. Life wasn't perfect. They still had arguments, insecurities, and the occasional sting of public scrutiny. But they faced everything hand in hand, as they had promised. His daughters grew to love Kaya fiercely, seeing in her a confidant and role model, not just their father's partner. Her family embraced Axon wholeheartedly, teasing him, feeding him, grounding him in the way only a close-knit family could. For a man raised in privilege yet often starved of genuine connection, it was everything. And then one crisp autumn evening, in the backyard of her family's home, beneath a canopy of twinkling lights and the hum of laughter from people who loved them, Axon dropped to one knee. Kaya gasped, her hands flying to her mouth as the world stilled. His eyes lifted to hers, filled with unshakable devotion. "I wasted so much time being afraid," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Afraid of judgment, afraid of losing control. But none of it mattered. The only thing that ever mattered was you. Kaya, you are my heart, my home, my forever. Marry me." Tears spilled down her cheeks as she whispered, "Yes." His daughters shrieked with joy, racing into Kaya's arms. Her family clapped and cried, the night ringing with celebration. And as Axon rose, pulling Kaya into his embrace, he knew he would never again let fear dictate his love. The wedding came months later, a breathtaking celebration of two worlds merging. Beneath an arch of flowers, with his daughters standing proudly beside them, Axon and Kaya vowed their forever. Guests wept openly as he kissed her like a man finally, irrevocably free. They built a life that blended glamour with groundedness, charity galas and quiet dinners with her family, business trips balanced with weekends where he cooked for her, badly but earnestly, while she laughed at his disastrous attempts. The media eventually quieted. Whispers faded into nothing. Their love had outlasted scandal, doubt, and judgment. Years later, when silver threaded through his hair and laugh lines deepened at her eyes, they still looked at each other the same way they had that night in the ballroom. With awe, with gratitude, with a love that had crossed every line and claimed both their hearts. The kind of love worth risking everything for. The kind of love that lasts forever. This is the end of Crossing Lines and Claiming Hearts. Please like and subscribe for more.